Alright, so we're going to pick up where we left off on responsive HTML. We've got some things working to make things fluid, but now we've got some issues where when things get a little skinny and tight, we would probably want them to be arranged a little bit differently. So the way we can change styles is to add what are called media queries. And let's go to Dreamweaver and we'll get started on that. Alright, so right now we've added some responsive HTML so you can see that the site is fairly fluid, but we get some spots like right here where we have issues with space, text, images, and I even added responsive HTML to the image, but it doesn't start shrinking till the container itself is trying to get it to shrink. Also at this point you can see that this aside, it's really skinny, and it'd probably be better at this point if we could have our main become 100% width, the aside becomes 100% width, but tucks down below here. So then we have a one column design for narrower stuff. The other thing that we have here is we still have a lot of margin. I'm sorry, I should say padding. Like we really don't, if we have a narrower viewing space, we really should maybe eliminate some of that and get some of that back. We really don't need all of that padding. So we're going to adjust that as well. Let's come to our Dreamweaver site. Now everything on cascading, just to reemphasize the cascading style sheet, most things that you want for your entire site we set in the body. And then you notice, and everything's going to inherit that because all of your HTML code is inside body. H1s are inside the body, we have links, nav, images, main, aside. So all of this is cascading, and so everything has this until there's a style sheet lower. Well, the same thing works with media queries. And with media queries, we can again change the cascading style as long as it's at the bottom of our style sheet. It wouldn't make sense and it wouldn't work to write your media queries up at the top, because then cascading styles below it are going to overwrite it. So again, in CSS it's important that you're working top down when you're working with these styles. So the first thing I'm going to do is give myself a little section name for my media queries. Actually, we're going to just do 2 main media queries to keep this simple. And so the first one, I'm going to change this name. First one we're going to want to change is at 48M. And that's 768 pixels. And smaller. Now in your book, if you read the HTML CSS book, they do this a little differently, where we have what's called at media screen, and they do a min width. And what they do is they start at the smallest and build back up. We're going to do this a little differently, and instead of min width, we're going to go max width. So essentially now, instead of building the styles all back at each size, which is what we'd have to do all the way back to what we essentially have up on top, we're going to take away from what's on top. And the only time these apply is if the entire browser width is 768 pixels or smaller, which is the same as saying 48M. Okay, so this is the first line of code, and then we have to have an open and close style brackets. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to change to keep everything in the same order is going to be some body padding. And up at top we had a padding of we actually cleared it out for 0 So I guess we could keep the 0. I guess I don't need to change the body. Let's get rid of that and not worry about body padding since we don't have any anyway. Let's do main. And let's, couple of things we're going to do here is we're going to change the width. Alright, so at this point we want, and I'm changing my styles here at the last second here, so I want to make sure I get this right. So the first thing we're going to restyle is the main. So the width of the main goes to 100%. It was at 68% and we now want 100%. Let's also look at the padding that we have. We have 0.25, 2M, and 1.5. That's short code for top, left, right, and bottom. Let's go and half all of these. So half of 125 is 0.125, half of 1M is 1M, and 1.5, I guess we're going to go to 0.75 M, 3/4 of an M. At the same time, we're going to change our aside styles at this viewing size. And since our main has gone to 100% width, let's do the same with our aside. We'll go 100% here. And what did I have for my padding here? I had 0.25 and 1M, but since these are now going to be the same width, I'm going to actually keep the padding the same as what I have for my main. Are there other things we could change? I suppose, for example, these images, I wouldn't necessarily have to, let's see, we could, at 768, it's probably not going to work to have it be full width yet. So let's not change anything with our image yet. So let's go ahead and change and hit the save on this. Let's just see what happens here. So now when we get to 768 pixels, which is the width of most tablets when they're held up in portrait view, up and down, then what's going to happen is our main and the side, instead of being side by side, they're going to go to full width. Since we have float left, float right, they can't stay there together. One has to drop down, and it's going to be the one that comes up first in the HTML page. So in our HTML page, we wrote our main. Where is it? Here's our main. Our main started well before, or right before we had our aside start. So all of this was main, and then you can see our aside is below it. And if you had other asides, it would just stack up on top of each other. Okay, so we come back to our browser, we'll hit refresh. Let's see what happens. So we still get responsive to a certain size, and then at one point, it's coming, they'll pop down right there and they become full width. And notice that we don't have any padding because we already had body padding of 0, so we're not really wasting any space. And now our margins, or our padding inside the main, is a little narrower than right there. So you can see on the left side we've gained back some of our space. Now if I wanted to be consistent, notice I have padding or margin around my image here, margin here, and then boom, I still have all this margin. So if I wanted to, in my styles, just to keep things consistent, I could come up, I could add my 2 custom styles. I will go ahead and just copy all of those just to make sure I get the same name. I'm not going to need all of those. And I want to make sure I got all my alignment for my coding going, because that's good to do always. So what I'm doing here is all for visual management of my code, just making sure everything has the same indentation. All right, so I don't need to repeat float because that's still inheriting. So I'll keep my floats. My max width I also want to keep, so I don't need max width and height. But what I do want to change are my margin rights and margin bottoms. So I had a padding of 0.125, and so I will make this margin right. Now this is going, if I do it in ems, you have to remember that it inherits what you have as far as what's inside the container. But I think this should work since, well, let's just try it. 0.125. At this, we can go ahead and get rid of these short codes. Now this might actually be inheriting from somewhere else. So 0.5. I think at this point I'm kind of guessing what I need. But I'll go ahead and save that. And I refresh. And that's probably too tight. So we have a little bit of, it's not inheriting the same size. So I would probably have to play around with this a little bit. Maybe we keep this at 0.5 and 1. Let's try that. And I could definitely go back and figure out what's it inheriting. That's a little bit better. Now ems means that it's always inheriting what was what it's inside. Another thing we could do is change this from M to rems. If you ever wanted to explore another measurement tool, we'll probably learn that in your next website design class, Website Design 2, where you can work with another relative unit of measure called rems, R-E-M. We'll just stick to ems in this class. Alright, this is pretty close. I think that it's generally there. So we had relatively the same spacing here. Bring it down smaller. And now it's just a little bit smaller, so I think that looks good. And our tip jar went to full size as well, the whole aside. So, see how that happens? So what happens at this point right here, and that was probably a good place to break it. Notice that this still looks good up until this point, but if I go any skinnier, it probably gets too skinny, and also the side gets too skinny, so it's probably better to drop them, make them full width. Go ahead and use up all the space to the edge of the browser window and make the most use of it. Alright, now there's still, now we could do a few more things. That was the 768, and I'm wondering, I mean, this doesn't look too bad, but one more size that we could add to this if we wanted to add, and just probably to make this easy, well, I'm going to go ahead and copy another line. And on this one, we're going to go, let's see, what do I want? I could go to 320 pixels, which is going to be 20M. And 320 pixels, that's generally a smartphone viewing width held up and down. And I don't think I'm going to be able to view this too much. So most of this is going to stay the same. However, I might want to change margins one more time. So let's go ahead and copy all of these. I won't need all of them necessarily. And before I put that in, I need to make sure I write my media screen, my media query, and max width 20M. Alright, let's see, what did I do wrong on my... Oh, the and has to go outside the parentheses. There we go, that's better. And we'll go ahead and change all of our... I don't need to worry about the width because it's still inheriting that from the 768 media query. But I can change these paddings and make them even go smaller. Let's see, we could just go to 0.25. 0.125 is already pretty small. I might not need to go any smaller than that. But I'll just make these go to 0.25 for the bottom. The side can go to 0.5 for left and right. And margin right, we'll just make this go down a little bit. So make these all 0.5. And you could always do this to whatever your liking is. These aren't absolutely the perfect numbers. It just gives you the idea. And we're probably not even going to be able to see what this does because I don't think my browser software lets me get that small. Right, where is it? Right there is where it hits. Now I'm wondering, so that's 320. So the other thing I could do is have these images go to full width as well. So let's go width 100%, height auto just to make sure. And what this will do is make the image also pop out to full width when it gets to that size. Again, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show you that because I don't know if my browser will get that small. Let's just try it and see what happens. This is as small as it gets. So that doesn't quite work. Now my image was created at 300 pixels. I'm just going to go ahead and keep my code this way, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what it would look like when you do full width. Now my image is 300 pixels. If I make it bigger than that, it's going to pixelate a little bit, but just to show you what that would look like, I'm going to do a larger size. Actually, I could just do it on this one. It doesn't really care what you write here as a comment, it's what you enter right here. So if I change this to 30M and hit save, let's see what happens here. I still didn't get down small enough. Let's see, it's saved. What did I have up here? I had 48M. So I'll just go a little bit bigger. And then the image would pop out to full size right there. And see how it's still sort of responsive? Now if I could get mine down to 480, then it would have done that. So even the image over here on the right, now because it was way too small, it pixelates a little bit. So it just was to show you that if I put the image at full width, it then pushes the content below it really nicely. And I think anytime you had an image, once you get close to the size of the images you have, that would probably be a good time to pop it out to full size. I'm going to change my query back to 20M and hit save. And how many queries can you write? You can write as many as you want. And you have to have them in the right order. That's the only requirement. Otherwise, you'll have contradicting styling going on or unexpected results. But that's all it is you write these little media queries that say, hey, how big are you? Oh, by the way, if you're 48M or smaller, change all of these styles. And you could change anything. And if I wanted to change the background color from being white, I could do that. I'm not sure why I'd want to do that, but maybe I'd have a good reason for it. And that's basic media queries. And we just wrote two very simple ones for common sizes. This one being a tablet portrait, and this one being a smartphone portrait. And there you have media queries.